Hello everyone, welcome to our newest update preview video, dedicated to Accessory Ascension. We teased this feature in our most recent What's Next in Raid video, but now it's time for the big reveal. First things first, Accessory Ascension works exactly the same as Artifact Ascension, so we won't rehash all the core mechanics in full. You can find a link to our Artifact Ascension guide in the description below, or read the in-game guide if you need a full recap. The one important thing to mention is that instead of oil, you'll be using a new resource called Extract to ascend your accessories. Just like potions and oil, Extract comes in 3 types: lesser, greater, and superior. The higher you want to ascend your accessories, the higher grade extract you'll need. Ascending an accessory will unlock a new bonus stat that improves with every new ascension level, and you won't be able to ascend accessories that are below rank 4 and level 12. That's about it. But this magical extract doesn't grow on trees, at least not any normal tree. Nope, you'll have to head to a new dungeon and win it via glorious battle. The Phantom Shogun's Grove is the place where it all happens. There, a mighty new boss awaits. Akumori the Phantom Shogun. This ghostly daimyo is not playing around and has a couple tricks up his sleeves, including a new debuff and a special counter. But don't worry, we've got your back. Let's see how you can exercise the Phantom Shogun. Akumori's got quite the arsenal of impressive and complex skills that all tie into his unique mechanics. In order to understand them, we're going to start with his third skill, Forest of Spears, to cover the important basics. Before unleashing any damage, Akumori first places a block passive skills debuff on your entire party for 3 turns. What's worse, this debuff cannot be resisted and it's protected. Sorry, UDK. This isn't your fight. After that, Akumori smacks your champion with the highest crit damage, and then places an irresistible and unblockable enfeeble debuff on them. What's that? A new debuff? Why yes, Akumori brings to bear a brand new debuff called Enfeeble. Champions under this new debuff can only place weak hits. Not only does this drastically decrease your damage and mean you cannot place debuffs in most situations, but it also plays into another major mechanic that we'll discuss in a moment. Next up, let's look at Akumori's passive skills. The first one, Shroud of the Shogun, connects directly to the new Enfeeble debuff we've just discussed. Akumori starts the battle with a special shade counter, and you're not going to want to let this thing tick up. The shade counter can be increased in the following ways. It increases by 8 stacks whenever one of your champions places a weak hit on Akumori, by 5 stacks for every critical hit Akumori himself deals out, and by 2 stacks for every enfeeble debuff you cleanse from your team. Each shade counter stack increases Akumori's critical rate by 1% and critical damage by 2%, so he's only getting stronger the longer he stays in the shade. Last but not least, this Shroud of the Shogun passive also grants Akumori immunity to turn meter reduction effects and enfeeble. If you think you're going to slow this samurai from exacting his revenge, think again. Okay, so that has to be it with the shade counter. No more horrible surprises? Well, we'd hate to disappoint you, as Akumori's Shroud of the Shogun passive also gives him access to some pretty powerful immunities, if you let him gather his strength. At 10 shade counter stacks, Akumori gets full immunity to poison damage. At 20 stacks, HP burn and smite damage no longer bother him. When the counter reaches 30 stacks, skills that deal damage based on Akumori's max HP become irrelevant. That's right, attacks like Cold Heart's Heartseeker and any of Akritzia's skills will deal no damage if the shade counter gets above 30. Finally, oh yeah, there's more. When the shade counter hits 40 and above, Akumori will ignore 100% of the target's defense when attacking. And if he kills a champion, he will immediately attack the rest of your party with an AoE attack. When the Phantom Shogun throws shade, he really means it. As you can see, you'll definitely want to keep the shade counter low at all costs. So let's dive into how you can do just that. Thanks to Akumori's Purge the Shadow passive skill, awakened champions can decrease the shade counter whenever they attack. The exact number of stacks removed by an awakened champion depends on their awakening level. So, champions with 1 awakening level will remove 1 stack per attack, while champions who are fully awakened will remove 6 shade counter stacks per skill. Given how powerful Akumori can become when his shade counter increases, I don't need to tell you how important it is to bring awakened champions to this fight, especially on the later stages. Whew, we've talked so much about Akumori's passives. Let's get back to his active skills. Unlike Forest of Spears, all of Akumori's other active skills will prioritize champions under an enfeebled debuff as their main target. Top tip: use the taunt buff to keep Akumori's attention away from your squishier champions under enfeeble. Scourge Sword, Akumori's second skill, is another brutal attack. Firstly, the Phantom Shogun targets one enemy. After he's smacked that champion, he'll then remove all buffs from your team, except from the initial target of the attack. As if that wasn't enough, Akumori will then spread the enfeebled debuff from the initial target to everyone else on your team. Remember, when Akumori uses his Forest of Spears skill, he places a protected enfeebled debuff, and he's looking to spread that debuff across your team with Scourge Sword. And because he's such a generous soul, Akumori will make sure that any champion who received an enfeebled debuff also gets a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. I know what you're thinking. What if there's no enfeebled debuff to spread? Well, Akumori will end his Scourge Sword attack by placing an unblockable and protected enfeebled debuff for 3 turns on the champion with the highest crit damage. He really wants you landing nothing but weak hits. Effectively, Akumori is looking to take your main damage dealer out of the picture with this attack. If you get hit with this, you can, and absolutely should, cleanse enfeeble ASAP. Bringing support champions who can cleanse debuffs is essential to vanquishing this ghostly warlord. Once he's placed and spread enfeebled debuffs, Akumori can maximize the effectiveness of his first skill, Spectral Lunge. First, he attacks one random champion. Once he hits that first champion, Akumori will then attack anyone else under an enfeebled debuff and fill his own turn meter by 20% for each enemy hit. If your whole team is under enfeeble, Akumori is getting 100% turn meter back when he hits you with this skill. So, keeping those enfeebled debuffs off your team is super important. Fewer champions get hit, and Akumori gets less turn meter. Win-win. Finally, we have Wraith Javelin. Akumori attacks a single champion and makes full use of his shade counter. He'll ignore the following protective buffs based on the number of shade counter stacks. 10 stacks will get him ignore block damage. 20 will nullify unkillable. 30 will make ally protection useless. And 40 or more stacks will let Akumori ignore your champion's shield buffs. Remember how Akumori's shade counter also lets him ignore 100% of defense and boosts his crit rate and crit damage massively when up over 40 stacks? Combine it with this skill, and you're looking at one of the most powerful attacks ever. You do not want to come up against this attack with a 40+ shade counter. So, you're staring down the mighty Phantom Shogun. How do you even begin to fight him? Well, there's a couple tips to make your life a bit easier. Tip numero uno: bring awakened champions. The higher their awakening level, the better, as they'll be more effective at keeping Akumori's shade counter in check. Keep the shade counter low, and you'll keep your survivability high. Tip number 2, bring a cleanser. As you can see, leaving enfeeble on your team is a bad idea. Cleansing enfeeble may increase the shade counter by 2 stacks, but it's better than Akumori gaining 8 stacks when you're landing nothing but weak hits on him. Tip the 3rd, bring plenty of support. Akumori hits hard, so you'll want buffs and debuffs that are going to blunt his attacks and strengthen your defenses. Decreased critical rate is going to be a great friend here, not just in terms of limiting damage, but also limiting Akumori from gaining shade counter stacks with critical hits. Tip 4, do not rely on powerful passive skills. Akumori can block passive skills almost indefinitely thanks to his Forest of Spears skill. Fast teams might counter this, but it's better to not rely on champions with powerful passives in the first place. And finally, consider equipping your champions with affinity breaker artifacts. You're likely going to be landing weak hits thanks to enfeeble, but having affinity breaker gives you a decent chance of changing them into critical hits instead. And that's it. We hope you guys are as excited as we are to face off against Akumori the Phantom Shogun. That's all we've got for this update preview. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our official channel for more raid content in the future. Good luck raiding the Phantom Shogun's growth. See you next time.